it's Belinda. I'm back to share day 4 in my 2019 December daily album. It's a bit of a longer video because I have got a really cool little interactive element that I've included. So I've kept most of that footage in just to walk through how I've put it together. I do want to apologise. The way that I had my camera set up while I was filming a few of these days, I was working a little bit too low. So I apologise that some of it will be slightly out of frame, but I hope it's not too bad. So as I said, I'm creating an interactive element. It's going to be a hidden photo that will be hidden by 2 flaps that connect to each other. So I've started off by cutting just a plain white cardstock down to 7 by 8.25, which is inches, which is the full size of a page protector, and that's going to serve as my backing piece for this flap opening. So I'm just popping my photo down to make sure that I'm happy with the way that that's going to sit. And then I've grabbed out my ruler to measure. So I'm measuring the distance. I'm leaving a little bit of a gap on either side of the photo for the fold. And then I'm just jotting down those measurements on this background paper because it is going to be covered up. So I know that the total dimension of my insert will need to be 6.25 inches wide by 8.25 inches long, and that will have it run the full length of the page and also cover up the photo, allowing enough seam space to fold. So I'm cutting down 2 more pieces of white cardstock. I'm not sure why my camera kept going out of focus here. 2 more pieces of white cardstock. I'm cutting those down to that 6.25 by 8.25. And what I've just jotted down there is 3.125 inches, or I'm really not good at the conversions when it comes to inches. It just doesn't stick in my brain. So I've cut 2 pieces down to 6.25 by 8.25, and each piece will be scored and folded at the 3.125 mark along the width. And hopefully once I've put it together, it will start to make a little bit more sense. So I've grabbed out my scoreboard, I've got both of those pieces, I'm popping them down, and this is again where I'm sorry that I am working a little bit lower than the camera, and I'm just scoring along at 3.125 inches. What is that? Is that 3 1/8? I guess 3 1/8 of an inch. Not sure what I was doing here, double checking something. Probably should have edited that out. I think I was checking my measurement to check where it was that I was putting that score line. So there's another score line at 3.125. So essentially what I've done is I've scored those 2 pieces of paper right down the middle, pretty much right down the middle. Yeah, right down the middle. A little bit of overhang. And this is where you can see it start to come together. So those pieces will join together in the middle to hide the photo or to cover up the photo. Then I'm going to get out some mixed media, and I'm going to use a star stencil to add some of the Gina K Gold Glitz Gel, I think it's called. This stuff is amazing. It is so glittery. It dries really quickly. I love the finish on it. It's just fantastic. So I'm taping the cardstock down, and I'm being careful of where I'm putting the tape. So I'm leaving a 1/4 inch seam around the outside because I know that I want to add some stitching around the inside flaps. And I'm putting that washi tape down because I want my cardstock to be stuck down nice and firmly. Now you will see me add the glitter gel to this one, and when I lift it up, unfortunately when I did the first one, I'm not sure what happened. I must have lifted up the stencil a little bit, or I put too much of it on. I've only used it once before to test it, so I'm not super familiar with it. But this first one that I did down, it did bleed a little bit under the stencil. It's kind of annoying me but I didn't want to redo it. I've already redone 3 pages in this album, so I really didn't want to go through and redo another one. So I do just leave it as it is. It's a little bit messier than I would have liked. I'm trying to go for a nice clean look to my album, so it does end up being a little bit messier, but like I said, I didn't want to go and redo it all over again, so I've left it. Looking at it now, I can see a little bit of the bleed under the stencil there, but I didn't see it at the time while I was doing it. So you can see they're not super defined on some of those stars and dots. But like I said, I just left it and I've gone with it. So I've popped those away to dry, and you will see how they look all finished a little bit later on in the video. And now I'm going to get started on my 4x6 journaling card. So I've decided to do some stamping and some embossing and to create my own journaling card. With the stash that I had, I don't have a whole lot of really prompt-based journaling cards, I guess. And particularly I found with December daily supplies, there's never really very many 4x6 journaling cards in any of the supplies that I've purchased in the past. So I've got so many stamps, I've decided to grab some out and to create my own. So I've got this vertical December, which I'm pretty sure was from the Felicity Jane Noel kit. And I'm using my Tim Holtz mini or travel stamp platform because I want to have the ability to restamp if my stamped image isn't quite clean or isn't complete, which I do end up needing to do. So I've applied some of the anti-static powder, I've inked up that stamp, and then I'm going to use some of the Tim Holtz Ranger Gold, I believe it is, embossing powder, or it might be a bronze, not sure. I'm just using some plain white copy paper to pick up that embossing powder. I've actually found that that's the most effective way to pick up the excess embossing powder and get it back into the jar. I do have a little tray, which is cool, but I just find I end up spending so much time cleaning the little bits of embossing powder out of the tray, and it just doesn't make it worth it. So you can see at the top of that December, the D and the E weren't quite a complete impression from the stamp, so I am going to have to go back over that. But I've got my heat gun out. Now I'll give you a little tip that it's probably nothing new, but it's something that I've somewhat recently discovered. Aside from letting your heat gun warm up a little bit before you apply it to your paper and your embossing powder, if you want to stop your paper from warping, I find it really helpful to actually apply the heat from the back of the paper as well as from the front. It just means that the heat is more evenly distributed, so the embossing powder melts a little bit quicker without warping your paper. So that's my little tip for embossing. Apply the heat to both sides of the design, both sides of the paper. So I've gone back over it again tipping that powder back in. And here's that heat gun. So you can see I've got it at the back of the paper there. And you can see, I think from there, that that paper is still, it's not particularly thick cardstock. I think it's only about 80 pounds, but it's still pretty clean and straight. Like, it hasn't really warped, and that's because I like to alternate where I apply the heat. So underneath that December, I've got this nice little scripty font stamp, and I can't recall if that came from the same stamp set or if it came from the stamp set from last year, from Felicity Jane last year. Or it could have come from a completely different stamp set. I'm not quite sure. If you're interested in knowing, let me know in the comments and I will have a look and I will see where it's come from. And now that I've put it on there, I can't even remember what it is that it says. I think it says family time. I'm pretty sure it says family time. And the reason I chose that is because my journaling is going to be about just a couple of events that happened on the 4th. Yeah, there we go, family time. And it was some stuff that we did together as a family. So I've used some black, I think it's the Ali Edwards black ink that I used here. It's a nice wet ink. And then I'm just using some clear embossing powder this time. I don't have any black embossing powder, and I wanted something that was a little bit different to that coppery gold, because I am going to add some more of the coppery gold in a little bit. So adding that embossing powder to the black ink just gives it a bit of a shimmer, a bit of a shine, helps it stand out a little bit more. And again, as with the previous, I am going to have to go back over it, but this time I'm just going back over it with the embossing ink rather than the black ink, because I didn't want to add any more pigment to it. I just wanted a bit more embossing glossiness to it. So I do now have my big giant tub of embossing powder, clear embossing powder, which I was super excited to get that happening so that I can do a little bit more embossing. I've seen quite a few people using something like this, and it was quite economical really to buy the big tubs of clear embossing powder and then pour them into there. So I did say that I was going to bring in a little bit more of that coppery gold, the Ranger Gold, and I'm going to create a line alongside that embossed stamping to separate the stamping from my journaling. So I'm away now having a look for my little embossing pens, which you'll see me bring in now. I'm using one of the thicker tips and just using my ruler, lining it up, and I'm going to run a line of this embossing pen alongside that stamping, and it'll go from just below the family time to just above or just in line with the top of the December, and add some more of that gold. And now you can see how that looks. You can see how easy it is to get the embossing powder off that paper. So just adding some heat to that to finish it off. And then I will take it away to my typewriter to do some journaling. So that's how it looks all finished. It's a really nice effect. All right, so we're back to my fold over flaps. That was a little bit fast, but you can see that I have run it through my sewing machine, and you can see that really nice glittery finish that Gina K Glitz Gel adds. So now I'm going to start to adhere my photo inside this little open the flap pocket, I guess, for want of a better term. I'm not quite sure what to call it. So I'm going to apply most of my double-sided tape down onto the inside or the backing of the flap. And you can see I've added one piece there onto my photo, but I'm only going to take one piece of adhesive off at a time, just to make sure that I've got it lined up really well before I go and stick everything else down. So again, adding the adhesive onto the backing, which is where the photo is going to sit. Because this is out of the pocket, this whole thing is going to be out of the pocket, I do want to make sure that everything is nice and secure. That's why I'm using quite a bit of tape. Okay, so I'm just checking that that photo is lined up nicely there. And then I'm trying to press down really firmly. That one was easy. I managed to get the backing off that tape really easy. So you see I've held it down in place, and then I've removed the backing from the tape. And then I'll go and remove the rest of it. And what that means is that I've got it positioned, can still move it around because there's no adhesive showing. And then it's exactly where I want it to be before I take all the rest of the backing off the tape and adhere it down. Again, just checking, yep, that's where I want it to be. Now I think I have a little bit more trouble with this one because oh no, that one's okay. I've been having a little bit of trouble with the backing on my double-sided tape lately. I'm not sure if it's my nails or if it's just the tape that I've got, but I don't know what it is. I've just been having some trouble getting the backings off the tape sometimes. I am considering purchasing an ATG once I've run out of my current adhesives, but I'm not sure. They're quite big and they're quite bulky, and I have a small space for scrapbooking, so I'm not sure if I want to commit to it just yet. So to keep this flap closed, I've got this little tag which I had cut out of one of the cut apart sheets from the Die Cuts with a View paper pad that I have included in my kit, and this number 4 which came from the Felicity Jane Noel kit. So I'm going to attach or adhere the number 4 to the front of that tag, and again I've used the red line tape because everything is going to be out of the pocket here. Nothing's going to be inside a page protector. I want to make sure that everything's stuck down nice and securely and it's not going to come off and get lost inside my album or inside my storage basket where all of my albums live. So I've got some of this white fluffy glittery trim and I've popped that through. I consider adding some of this gold trim in, which you're going to see me fuss around with a little bit, but I decide that it's not what I want to do. And so I'm just going to go back to this white trim and I'm going to thread it through, and I'm just going to tie a simple bow at the front with my big clumsy fingers. I do actually manage to get a decent looking bow, which was good, but I had to use my tweezers because big clumsy fingers. All right, so that's my tag, which is going to serve as the closing mechanism for this little flap here. Clearly I wasn't happy with that bow, so I'm going to go and tie it again. No, I don't tie it. That's right, I don't tie it. I give up on tying it in a bow and I just staple it onto the front of the tag instead. So I'm actually going to use some square magnets to hold this together. I bought these from Spotlight about a month or so ago, and I did think that I might find some kind of reason to use it in my December daily album because I knew that I was going to be doing some out of the pocket stuff this year. So I grabbed those and I thought this would be the perfect opportunity to use those magnets. So there's a bit of that red line tape again. So I'm only going to adhere one side of this tag down because the other side is going to have the magnet underneath it. Just going to add a little bit more so that the tag's not floating around there. There are those two little magnets. They're not self-adhesive magnets, so they do need to have adhesive applied to them. I was just trying to figure out the positive and negative to make sure that I had them placed the right way before I stuck them down. So I'm using red line tape. I don't know how well the red line tape will go on the magnets, so it's something that I'm going to have to keep an eye on. So far so good, but yeah, we'll see. We'll see how long they last. So at this point I'm thinking, the magnets add a little bit of bulk. Do I really want to go with that little bit of bulk, or do I want to do something else? And I'm thinking maybe I can grab some of my twine. I've got this really nice chunky red and white twine, and maybe I can create something where it's like a present and you have to untie the present. But when I put the twine around, it just doesn't work, and I don't really have any other ribbons that I'm happy with, and I don't really want to cover up that tag. I like the little trees on the bottom of that tag. So I decided to stick with the magnets. And to adhere them down, it's really simple. You'll see that I've put the red line tape onto the back of each of those magnets. I'm going to pop them onto the back of the tag where I want it to go. Oh, no, I hadn't applied it. There you go. Pop the red line tape onto the back of the opposing magnet, remove the backing, close it up, and just press it down nice and firmly. And that's it. So it does a really good job of keeping it closed. It's not too, when you open it, there's not too much resistance, so it's not going to tear anything. I'm really happy with it. Like I said, it adds a little bit of bulk, which I'm not super happy about, but it's not a huge amount of bulk. It's not like my album from 2018, so I'm quite happy to live with that. And I'm just going to get that ready to stick it down onto the backing piece, which I cut. Again, making sure that I've applied plenty of double-sided tape because I do want to make sure that everything is nice and secure and is not going to fall apart inside my album. And once again, I'm not going to remove any of the backing on the adhesive until I've got it in the right position. And I've lined up the outside edge there. And that's it. It's stuck down. So that's my almost completed journaling card. I had these pink number stickers, which were from, I think, a previous Ali Edwards kit in my stash. And I had 3 little stories to tell from the day. So I numbered them. I'd left space when I typed up my journaling for those numbers, but they just didn't stand out enough from the background. So I had a little bit of a think about what I could do to pop them up a bit, and I've decided to reach for my favorite gold glitter stars. So I've grabbed 3 gold glitter stars from my little jar, and I'm going to adhere those down in the spots that I had left blank in my journaling. And because these numbers are going onto the glitter now, I'm adding just a little bit of extra wet adhesive to make sure that they stick down nice and firmly. So I peeled these numbers up. Some of them, I think the number 1 got a bit bent, but I just left it. So the 3 stories that I told here was, first of all, my son got his first haircut. The second story was our visit to Santa, which is what the photo was. And then the third story was my husband flying back up to work in the afternoon. I didn't include photos of the airport drop-off, and I didn't include photos of my son's first haircut. I only included that photo of Santa, and that's totally fine. You don't have to, I don't think you have to include a photo for everything. Sometimes the journaling is enough. And the reason that I decided to put my photo inside that flip open pocket is because it was such a really bold red, and it was just a little bit too much. I love the photo, but it was just a bit too bold, so I wanted to cover it up just a little bit. So to finish it off, I'm adding just a little 4x6 filler card, which I'm creating here. I went through my stash and I pulled out this rose gold foil geometric design, which was, I believe, from the Paisley Press kit last year. But I didn't want it as it was. I had this beautiful pink little polka dot, almost like a snow pattern, 4x6 card. And so I cut out that geometric rose gold wreath, half wreath, and then I'm going to adhere that onto the card, and I'm going to finish it off with some of these black foam scripty word stickers, and I think I use the one that says ho ho ho. I was going to use my ruler to make sure it was lined up, and then I realized I can just use my cutting mat. So making sure it's lined up nice and evenly there. And I like the way that that has added just a little bit of a pop and a little bit more dimension to it. So I'm pulling that foam word. Yeah, it is ho 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 that I put down. It was a little bit fiddly to get this down onto the card nice and straight, but I got there in the end. And that will be it for this day 4 spread. If you've made it this far, thank you for watching. I know it was a bit of a marathon, and I hope I haven't bored you with too much detail. If you do decide to recreate something similar, I would love for you to share it with me so that I can see it. I really love this interactive element. I think it's a nice way to include my photo that doesn't necessarily fit with the aesthetic of the whole album. I do have some close-up photos coming at the end, as usual. If you have enjoyed this, I would really love your support to like, subscribe, or comment. But otherwise, thank you so much for watching and have a great day.